Hey humans, welcome to Read to Me, Matt Dunn. I'm Matt Dunn, and I'm going to read to you. We're reading The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft, Part 4. In May, the insects came, and Nene's place became a nightmare of buzzing and crawling. Most of the creatures seemed not quite usual in their aspect and motions, and their nocturnal habits contradicted all former experience. The gardeners took to watching at night, watching in all direction at random for sometimes. They could not tell what. It was then that they all owned that Thaddeus had been right about the trees. Mrs. Gardner was the next to see it from the window as she watched the swollen boughs of a maple against a moonlit sky. The boughs surely moved, and there was no wind. It must be the sap. Strangeness had come into everything growing now, yet it was none of Nene's family at all who had made the next discovery. Familiarity had dulled them, and what they could not see was glimpses by a timid windmill salesman. What? Yet it was none of the Nene's family at all who made the next discovery. Familiarity had dulled them. Familiarity had dulled them. So I guess all this shit already happened to them. They just didn't fucking know. They're like, yeah, everything's fucked up. Okay, life is like this. This is life. Fuck. And what they could not see was glimpsed by a timid windmill salesman from Bolton who drove by one night in ignorance of the country legend. Ignorance. What he told in Arkham was given a short paragraph in the Gazette, and it was there that all the farmers, Nene included, saw it first. The night had been dark, and the buggy lamps faint, but around a farm in the valley, which everyone knew from the account must be Nene's, the darkness had been less thick. The dim, though distinct luminosity seemed to inhere in all the vegetation, grass, leaves, and blossoms alike, while at one moment a detached piece of phosphorescence appeared to stir furtively in the yard near the barn. Well, it sounds like a lot is happening, doesn't it? The grass had so far seemed untouched, and the cows were freely pastured in the lot near the house. But toward the end of May, the milk began to be bad. Then Nene had the cows driven to the uplands, after which the trouble ceased. Not long after this, the change in grass and leaves became apparent to the eye. All the verdure was going gray and was developing a highly singular quality of brittleness. Amy was now the only person who ever visited the place, and his visits were becoming fewer and fewer. When school closed, the gardeners were virtually cut off from the world, and sometimes let Amy do their errands in town. The gardeners are people, not like the gardeners as in the laborers, but the gardeners as in the smiths. Sometimes blah blah blah, and they were failing curiously both physically and mentally, and no one was surprised when the news of Mrs. Gardner's madness stole around. It happened in June. In June, about the anniversary of Meteor's fall, in June, about a year later. Okay. It happened in June, about the anniversary of the meteor's fall, and the poor woman screamed about things in the air which she could not describe. In her raving, there was not a single specific noun, but only verbs and pronouns. Like, I, fart, walk, came. Pamper. You. Things moved and changed and fluttered, and ears tingled to impulses which were not holy sounds. Something was taken away. She was being dragged. Oh, dragged. She was being drained of something. Something was fastening itself on her that ought not to be. Someone must make it keep off. Is this thing she's saying? Something was taken away. She was being drained of something. Something was fastening itself on her that ought not to be. Someone must make it keep off. Nothing was ever still in the night. The walls and windows shifted. Nene did not send her to the country asylum, but let her wander about the house as long as she was harmless to herself and others. Okay, so Nene's last name is Gardner, I'm assuming. Well, Nene's wife is fucked up, and he's just like, just walk around, it's all right. I'd probably do the same. God damn it, because he ain't got shit else to do. Even when her expression changed, he did nothing. But when the boys grew afraid of her, and Thaddeus nearly fainted at the way she made faces at him, he decided to keep her locked in the attic. Jesus Christ. Kind of fucked up. By July, he had ceased to speak and crawled on all fours. Oh wait, by July she had ceased to speak and crawled on all fours. And before that month was over, Nene got the mad notion that she was slightly luminous in the dark, and as he now clearly saw was the case with the nearby vegetation. Luminous. She's glowing. She's quite glowing. Maybe she's infected. It was a little before this that the horses had stampeded. Something had aroused them in the night, and their neighing and kicking in their stalls had been terrible. There seemed virtually nothing to do to calm them, and when Nene opened the stable door, they all bolted out like frightened woodland deer. It took a week to track all four, and when found they were seen to be quite useless and unmanageable. Something had snapped in their brains, and each one had to be shot for its own good. Nene borrowed a horse from Amy for his haying, but found it would not approach the barn. It shied, balked, and whinnied, and in the end he could do nothing but drive it into the yard while the men used their own strength to get the heavy wagon near enough the hayloft for convenient pitching. And all the while the vegetation was turning gray and brittle. Even the flowers whose hue had been so strange were graying now, and the fruit was coming out gray and dwarfed and tasteless. The asters and goldenrod bloomed gray and distorted, and the roses and zinnies and hollyhocks in the front yard were such blasphemous-looking things that Nene's oldest boy, Zenas, cut them down. Let's call him Zay. The strangely puffed insects died about that time, even the bees that had left their hives and taken to the woods. By September, all the vegetation was fast crumpling to a grayish powder, and Nene feared that the trees would die before the poison was out of the soil. His wife now had spells of terrific screaming, and he and the boys were in a constant state of nervous tension. They shunned people now, and when school opened, the boys did not go. But it was Amy, on one of his rare visits, who first realized that the well water was no longer good. It had an evil taste that was not exactly foetid, nor exactly salty. Foetid. I don't know what that word. It had an evil taste that was not exactly foetid, nor exactly salty. And Amy advised his friend to dig another well on higher ground to use till the soil was good. To use. Wow. Amy advised his friend to dig another well on higher ground to use till the soil was good again. Nene, however, ignored the warning, for he had by that time become clues to strange and unpleasant things. He and the boys continued to use the tainted supply, drinking it as listlessly listlessly and mechanically as they ate their meager and ill-cooked meals, and did their thankless and monotonous chores through the aimless days. There was something of stolid resignation about them all, as if they walked half in another world between lines of nameless guards to a certain and familiar doom. Thaddeus went mad in September after a visit to the well. He had gone with a pail and had come back empty-handed, shrieking and waving his arms, and sometimes lapsing into an inane titter or a whisper about the moving colors down there. 2 in one family were pretty bad, but Nene was very brave about it. He let the boy run around about for a week until he began stumbling and hurting himself, and then he shut him in the attic room across the hall from his mother's. The way they screamed at each other from behind their locked doors were very terrible, especially the little Merwin, who fancied they talked in some terrible language that was not of earth. Merwin, M-E-R-W-I-N. Let's call him Murmur. Murmur was getting frightfully imaginative, and his restlessness was worse after the shutting away of the brother who had been his greatest playmate. Poor Murmur. Almost at the same time, the mortality among the livestock commenced. Poultry turned grayish and died very quickly, their meat being found dry and noisome upon cutting. Hogs grew inordinately fat, then suddenly began to undergo loathsome changes which no one could explain. Their meat was of course useless, and Nene was at his wits' end. No rural veterinary would approach his place, and the city veterinary from Arkham was openly baffled. The swine began growing gray and brittle and falling to pieces before they died, and their eyes and muzzles developed singular alterations. It was very inexplicable, for they had never been fed from the tainted vegetation. Then something struck the cows. Certain areas, or sometimes the whole body, would be uncannily shriveled or compressed, and atrocious collapses or disintegration were common. That's fucked up. These cows, poor cows, in the last stages, the death was always the result. And in the last stages, and death was always the result, there would be a graying and turning brittle like that which beset the hogs. There could be no question of poison, for all the cases occurred in a locked and undisturbed barn. No bites of prowling things could have brought the virus, for what live beast of earth can pass through solid obstacles? It must be only natural disease. Yet what disease could wreak such results was beyond any mind's guessing. When the harvest came, there was not an animal surviving on the place, for the stock and poultry were dead and the dogs had run away. These dogs, 3 in number, had all vanished one night and were never heard of again. The 5 cats had left some time before, but their going was scarcely noticed, since there now seemed to be no mice, and only Mrs. Gardner had made pets of the graceful felines. All right, so everyone's gone crazy. Mrs. Gardner's gone crazy. Nene's son, what's his name? Thaddeus. Thaddeus has gone crazy. They're both screaming at each other in a language that is either chaos or madness. And are they talking to each other from across the hall, like just screaming at each other, like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, what are they doing? The cows, the pigs, the dogs, everything is just withering away and dying. What about the humans, though? Anyway, if you'd like me to read more, please check out more of my videos. Like, subscribe, and comment down below.